Here in Europe, another attempt today in Brussels to save the Iran nuclear deal from unraveling. Germany, France and Britain have called for dialogue amid increased tension in the Gulf region between Iran and the United States. Iran on Sunday said that it would restart talks if the U.S. lifts sanctions and returns to the 2015 deal. Meanwhile, Iran has resumed enriching uranium beyond 3.5%. That's a breach of the deal. But what does it mean? Well, for light water reactors, 3.5% enriched uranium is needed. In research or shipped reactors, the uranium has to be about 20% enriched. Weapons-grade uranium is enriched at least 85%. The extent to which Iran is permitted to enrich uranium is at the heart of the nuclear deal.
On July 14, 2015, the international community uttered a joint sigh of relief. The signing of the nuclear deal with Iran was the beginning of a new chapter in relations with the country.
I think this is a sign of hope for the entire world, and we all know that this is very much needed in these times.
We have reached an agreement that will make the Middle East and the world a whole lot safer.
It is a step away from the specter of conflict and towards the possibility of peace.
After almost a decade of negotiations, Iran agreed to get rid of 98% of its enriched uranium and to reduce the number of centrifuges in exchange for relief from international economic sanctions. The deal established a new relationship based on transparency, but by no means trust.
This is a bilateral agreement. If the other signatories comply, we will make sure we do the same.
In January 2016, international sanctions on Iran were lifted after the International Atomic Energy Agency certified the country's compliance with the obligations established in the nuclear deal. This time, the sigh of relief came out of Tehran, the capital of an oil-rich country driven to the brink of an almost total trade embargo in place since 2006. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until Donald Trump came onto the stage. He disliked the accord from the get-go. Slamming the Obama-brokered deal was an important part of his campaign rhetoric. Once in power, he followed through on his promise to pull out of the agreement.
We cannot prevent an Iranian nuclear bomb under the decaying and rotten structure of the current agreement. Therefore, I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
Since then, the US has reintroduced all the previous nuclear-related sanctions against Tehran, along with other punitive measures. As a tit-for-tat, the Iranian government announced that it will stop abiding by some of its commitments and requested that the remaining signatories ease restrictions on its banking and oil sectors. As that failed to happen by its July 7th deadline, Iran announced it would breach another limit by raising uranium enrichment, further unraveling the landmark deal.
For more, I'm joined here in the studio by Behnam Ben Taleblu, research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, a U.S. foreign policy and national security think tank, which opposed the 2015 deal and has advised the Trump administration. Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We have Iran saying that it's ready for dialogue if sanctions are eased. And just yesterday, European powers are calling now also for talks, reiterating that call. Shouldn't the U.S. and Iran head back to the negotiating table?
I think that's absolutely right. I think the Trump administration, despite putting massive financial, economic, and some would even say military pressure on the Islamic Republic, is looking to get Tehran to come back to the negotiating table. Tehran has had some of these different preconditions, has shot a couple of a drone out of the sky, has fired on tankers using mines. Iran, I think, is trying to get the conditions ready for it to eventually come back to the table, because I think it knows that it eventually will have to come back to the table.
But I mean, just yesterday, and we have to address this, a British newspaper publishing these leaked memos from the former UK ambassador to Washington, essentially saying he claims that Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal with no plan on what to do next. Does the United States have a plan? Well,
the plan seems to be use exactly the same sanctions, exactly the same tools that got us to the JCPOA nuclear deal. But again, once you get to the table, to broaden the issue set. The administration has talked about these 12 points. I'm sure that you know it's not just the nuclear issue, it's the missile issue, the military issue, the terrorism issue. basically what has made and sustained Iran an international pariah for the past 40 years. The qualm that we have, again, as an institution with the JCPOA nuclear deal is that it only addressed the nuclear threat, and it didn't even do that quite well. So now that there's an opportunity to regenerate the pressure to get Iran to come back to the table, why not broaden the issue set and see if Iran blinks first?
But, you know, there's a saying, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? What is your long-term goal here? Is the government looking for regime change, for example, in Iran?
There's definitely been people in Washington who've been talking about regime change, but I think the Trump administration remains committed to getting a bigger, broader, better deal. I think even last summer, as you saw some pretty fiery tweets exchanged between Iranian and American officials, the administration has been committed to getting Rouhani to the negotiating table, to talking with Iran. And I think it's been quite unprecedented to see such financial pressure coupled with a desire to talk. If anything, Tehran may try to abuse this desire to talk to up its leverage and to make America want a deal more than it needs a deal.
Why? You're talking about this bigger, broader, better deal. I mean, what makes you so optimistic that you might get that? Because, I mean, when we're seeing the situation currently on the ground, I mean, just in the past month, we saw this plan for U.S. airstrikes on Iran, Trump calling it off at the last minute. I mean, the tensions are rising in a way that is concerning the international community. How do you see the dangers in the region of destabilizing Iran through this policy?
Well, the funny thing is that Iran is the one destabilizing the region. I think it's important to have the causal chain correct here. Iran is, trying to get leverage. It knows that it can't outlast this pressure policy. For the first year of max pressure, it thought it could outlast the Trump administration. Now it's trying to create leverage, trying to up the ante, do things that actually would make America, again, return to the negotiating table and appear to want a deal more than Tehran needs a deal. So yes, Iran does have these destabilizing policies, which behooves us in the international community to come together, not have this transatlantic divide that currently exists, and attempt to present a united Western front to deal with these issues diplomatically.
What do you make of the European efforts? Because, I mean, EU foreign ministers are meeting in Brussels later today, and you've put them in a bit of a sticky position here, haven't you?
Well, the Europeans, for the past few years, before the U.S. pulled out of the nuclear deal, defended the JCPOA as if it was the best thing since sliced bread. And now I think they're beginning to realize that, yes, missiles should have been included. Yes, there's some flaws with the deal. The sunset issues should have been addressed. And in fact, there was a 6-month period from January to May of 2018 when the Europeans and Americans had a transatlantic dialogue over how to fix the deal. That process, unfortunately, faltered, but it's something that can be resurrected. And if the Europeans do want a diplomatic agreement to stem Iran's nuclear program, and the Americans want to have pressure to get Iran to the table, then there is space there to actually collaborate and bridge that transatlantic gap. The question is, will the Europeans turn a blind eye to Iran's nuclear violations and continue to side with the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism against their major Western liberal international partner?
Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you so much for joining us with that view. We appreciate it.